Ever feel like you need to get your head around something important, like how businesses actually work, but just the idea of wading through dense theory makes you, well, tune out?
Yeah, happens to the best of us.
Well, you're definitely in the right place. This is the deep dive, and we're all about giving you that essential understanding fast and hopefully without the overwhelm.
As your shortcut, maybe. We sift through the material so you get the key takeaways, the stuff that really matters.
Today, we're diving into the philosophy of management. Our source material is a really insightful lecture. It covers the history, the core ideas, and why this stuff is still so relevant.
Right.
And our mission for you is basically to pull out those absolute gems, the most valuable insights, so you walk away with a solid grasp of management thinking and how it actually plays out in the real world.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's jump right in. So first things first, what exactly are we talking about with philosophy of management?
Well, at its core, and the lecture puts it quite nicely, it's the study of the fundamental principles, assumptions, and beliefs that underlie managerial practices.
Yeah.
It's really trying to understand, what organizations are, what managers actually do, and the ethical side of it all, the social impact of business decisions.
So it's less about the day-to-day techniques and more about the thinking behind it all, the foundation.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. It's the framework for how we even approach managing. It kind of forces us to question assumptions we might just take for granted.
Yeah.
And to look at things from different angles, maybe consider alternatives, and hopefully make better, more informed decisions in the end, getting those aha moments without getting lost in jargon.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like needing the why before the how.
Mm-hmm.
So how did this way of thinking even develop? I mean, management wasn't always approached this way, was it?
Oh, not at all. Management thinking has really evolved, changed quite dramatically over time. A lot of it was driven by huge shifts in society, in the economy, and definitely technology. Right. The lecture kind of walks us back to the late 19th, early 20th centuries first. That's the era of what we call classical management.
Okay, the Industrial Revolution time. Big factories, mass production.
Precisely. And back then, the main goal, the absolute focus, was on efficiency and productivity, getting the most output possible.
Makes sense for the time.
Yeah, and they tried to apply scientific methods to work itself. You've probably heard of Frederick Taylor.
Scientific management, right?
That's the one. He was all about analyzing every single task, breaking it down, timing it, optimizing workflows to squeeze out every bit of efficiency. The big idea was, treat work like a science.
So find the one best way for every little job.
Exactly. Then you also had Henri Fayol, who focused more on the administrative side, developing principles for overall management efficiency.
Okay.
And Max Weber, who gave us the concept of bureaucracy. Think structure, hierarchy, clear rules and procedures.
A very ordered, structured view of organizations.
Yeah, definitely. And those ideas led to the main schools of thought from that time. Scientific management, administrative management, and bureaucratic theory. Very top-down, very system-focused.
Okay, so if that was the starting point, what came next? Was there a reaction against that mechanical view?
There certainly was. By the middle of the 20th century, you start to see the rise of the human relations movement. And yeah, it was largely a response to that sort of impersonal, efficiency at all costs vibe of classical management.
Right.
The focus shifted pretty dramatically towards the human element, things like motivation, employee satisfaction, group dynamics. The core idea being people aren't just cogs in a machine.
Their feelings, their relationships, they actually matter for productivity.
Absolutely. The idea that, a happier, more engaged workforce is probably going to be a more productive one.
Seems obvious now, it maybe wasn't then.
You'd be surprised. Thinkers like Elton Mayo did those famous Hawthorne studies. They kind of stumbled onto the idea that social factors, just being paid attention to, could impact performance.
Ah, the Hawthorne effect.
Yeah. And Abraham Maslow gave us his hierarchy of needs, trying to explain what actually motivates people.
Needs like safety, belonging, self-actualization.
Exactly. And Douglas McGregor came up with Theory X and Theory Y, basically, two opposing views managers might have about whether employees are inherently lazy or naturally motivated.
Okay.
So this period really developed the human relations and behavioral science schools. The huge takeaway: people are complex, and understanding their psychology, their needs, is vital for effective management.
A definite shift towards a more people-centered approach. So we've got efficiency, then people. Mm-hmm. What's the next big evolution?
Well, around the same time, mid 20th century, systems theory started gaining traction. This offered a much broader lens.
How so?
Instead of just looking inside the organization, it viewed organizations as open systems, meaning they're constantly interacting with their external environment, customers, competitors, society, you name it.
Okay, so not isolated bubbles.
Not at all. It emphasizes interconnectedness, how different parts of the organization influence each other, and how the whole thing is influenced by the outside world. The core insight, everything is connected.
Like an ecosystem, maybe, where a change in one place affects others.
That's a perfect analogy. Key figures here were Ludwig von Bertalanffy, he's often called the father of general systems theory, and Russell Ackoff, who really pushed systems thinking in management.
And that this led to?
Well, systems theory itself, obviously, but also contingency theory, which we'll probably circle back to. It's the idea that the best way depends on the situation.
Okay, interesting. So efficiency, people, interconnected systems.
Yeah.
What's the next big turn in management philosophy?
Towards the later part of the 20th century and into the 21st, we see postmodernism making its mark on management thinking.
Postmodernism, that sounds complex.
It can be, yeah. It takes a more critical stance. It starts questioning a lot of the established theories and assumptions. It puts emphasis on things like diversity, power relations within organizations, and how our understanding of reality itself is often socially constructed.
So challenging the idea of universal truths in management.
Exactly. The core insight is there isn't necessarily one single right answer or grand theory that explains everything. Context, perspective, power, these things really shape organizational life.
Who were the key thinkers influencing this?
People like Michel Foucault, looking at power and knowledge, Jacques Derrida on deconstruction, Jürgen Habermas on communication and rationality. Their ideas filtered into management studies.
And this led to which schools of thought?
Primarily postmodernism itself as applied to management, and also critical management studies. Both encourage, questioning the status quo, looking at who benefits from certain structures, and being aware of those underlying power dynamics.
Fascinating. So that brings us more or less up to date. What are the big themes now?
Right. The lecture highlights that contemporary trends are really grappling with issues like sustainability, ethics and corporate social responsibility, CSR globalization, and the huge impact of digital transformation.
Yeah, those feel like the defining issues of our time.
They really are. And concepts that reflect this, like stakeholder theory thinking beyond just shareholders and corporate governance, have become way more central. The big picture insight today. Management has to be responsible, ethical, and incredibly adaptive in this super complex, interconnected global environment.
Wow, quite a journey from optimizing factory tasks to navigating global sustainability and AI. Okay, so stepping back in the history, the lecture also breaks down some fundamental concepts, the real building blocks.
Yeah, 4 core ideas that kind of run through all these different theories and practices. They are the purpose of organizations, the nature of management itself, ethics and morality, and power and authority.
Got it. Let's take the first one, purpose of organizations. Seems simple enough, make money, right? Isn't that the purpose?
Well, yes and no. Making a profit is definitely a purpose, often a primary one for businesses. But the lecture makes the point that the fundamental purpose can be, and often is, broader than just that.
Okay.
It's about the organization's core reason for existing. It's why. This purpose acts like a guiding principle, shaping decisions, strategies, everything. The key insight here is that profit isn't always the only purpose or even the ultimate one, and having a clear sense of purpose is critical.
Can you give some examples of different purposes?
Sure. Obvious profit-making examples are companies like, say, Apple or Google. Their primary goal is generating returns for shareholders. But then you have nonprofits like the Red Cross or Doctors Without Borders. Their purpose is humanitarian aid.
Right. Different motivation entirely.
Totally. Or universities like Harvard or Oxford, their purpose is education and research. Government agencies like the FBI or the Department of Education exist to provide specific public services.
Okay, that clarifies the spectrum. What about a company like Tesla? They're definitely for profit, but they talk a lot about their mission.
Tesla is a perfect example the lecture might use. They aim to be profitable, absolutely, but they frame their purpose much more broadly to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy.
And that mission influences their products, their strategy.
Everything. It shapes their innovation, their branding, their company culture. The lecture really stresses how deeply that stated purpose influences organizational identity and decision-making.
That makes sense. It provides direction beyond just the balance sheet. Okay, next core concept. The nature of management. What do managers actually do? Because that seems like it could vary wildly.
It definitely does vary depending on the context, industry, company size, culture, but the lecture identifies some common threads, some core functions that generally apply.
Like what?
Well, fundamentally, managers are involved in decision making. Then there's organizing, structuring the work, coordinating activities and tasks. Leading is another huge one, motivating people, inspiring them, guiding teams towards goals.
People side of things.
Exactly. And finally, controlling monitoring performance, checking results against plans, and taking corrective action when things go off track. The core insight. Management is this multifaceted role that blends strategy, organization, leadership, and oversight.
So there were a lot of hats: strategist, organizer,
Yeah.
coach, referee sometimes.
That's a pretty good way to think about it. Imagine like the CEO of a tech startup. They're making huge strategic bets, figuring out funding, trying to inspire their small team, and keeping an eye on whether they're hitting milestones. It's all those roles rolled into one.
Right. And the lecture knows that the emphasis changes, right?
Ah.
A frontline supervisor's leading looks different from a CEO's.
Absolutely. The context shapes which aspects are most prominent. A manager in a small shop versus a VP at a global corporation, very different day-to-day realities. But those core functions are usually present in some form.
Got it. Okay, let's move to a big one. Ethics and morality. How does this fit into the philosophy of management? It feels more critical now than ever.
It really does. This concept is all about how organizations integrate ethical thinking into their decisions and actions. It's about the moral obligations they have, both the organization as a whole and the individual managers.
What kind of obligations?
The lecture points to several key areas. Thinking about the impact on all stakeholders, not just owners, but employees, customers, the community. Acting in a socially responsible way.
Beyond just obeying the law.
Definitely. Ensuring fairness and justice in how people and groups are treated, maintaining basic honesty and integrity in all dealings, and increasingly important, environmental responsibility, minimizing harm to the planet. The main insight is that ethics isn't some optional add-on. It's fundamental to good, sustainable management.
So it's about building trust and doing the right thing, essentially.
Exactly. It's about striving for decisions that are morally sound, and considering those wider consequences. The lecture uses an example like a pharmaceutical company. Maybe they develop a life-saving drug, but it has potentially serious side effects.
A real ethical dilemma.
Right. They have to weigh the benefits against the risks, communicate transparently, act responsibly. Integrating ethical principles isn't just nice, it builds reputation, trust, and often leads to better long-term outcomes.
Makes sense. Okay, the last fundamental concept: power and authority. We hear these terms used together a lot. Are they the same thing?
They're related but distinct. The lecture clarifies this. Power is basically the ability to influence or control what others do. It can come from different places, your formal position, sure, but also your knowledge, your expertise, the resources you control, even your relationships.
So you could have power without a fancy title.
Absolutely. Think of the expert engineer everyone relies on, even if they aren't a manager. Authority, on the other hand, is the legitimate right to exercise power. It's usually granted based on your role or position in the organizational hierarchy. It's the accepted right to tell someone what to do.
Okay, so authority is formal, power can be informal too.
Precisely. The key insight is that power and authority aren't always aligned. You can have authority, like a new manager, but struggle to exert real power or influence. Or someone might have significant informal power without much formal authority.
Like the CEO's longtime assistant who knows everything and everyone.
Perfect example. The CEO has the formal authority, granted by the board, but their actual power to get things done might depend heavily on their charisma, their expertise, their relationships, sources beyond just the title. Understanding these power dynamics, the lecture argues, is absolutely crucial for managing effectively and responsibly.
Really helps to untangle those concepts. Okay, so those are the building blocks. The lecture also talks about theoretical frameworks. What are these used for?
Think of these frameworks as different lenses or models. They give us specific ways to look at and analyze organizations and management practices. The lecture focuses on 4 key ones: systems theory, contingency theory, stakeholder theory, and postmodernism.
We touched on systems theory earlier in the history part. Quick recap.
Right. Systems theory views organizations as these complex, interconnected systems that are open to and constantly interacting with their environment. It stresses interdependence, how changes in one part ripple through others, the core message for managers. Think holistically, see the connections, be aware of the wider context.
Got it. See the forest, not just the trees. What about contingency theory? The name sounds like it means, well, it depends.
You absolutely nailed it. That's the essence of contingency theory. It argues there's no single best way to manage or structure an organization.
No universal rules.
Exactly. The most effective approach is contingent on the specific situation. The organization's size, its industry, the technology it uses, its culture, the stability of its environment, and so on. The key insight for managers: be flexible. Tailor your approach. Don't blindly apply rules that worked somewhere else.
That seems very practical, actually. Avoids rigid thinking. Okay, stakeholder theory. That term comes up a lot now.
It does. Stakeholder theory challenges the traditional view that a company's only real responsibility is to its shareholders or owners.
Right, maximizing profit for them.
Instead, it argues that organizations have obligations to a much wider group of stakeholders. Basically, anyone who is affected by the organization's actions or has a legitimate interest in it.
Like who?
Employees, customers, suppliers, local communities, government regulators, even the environment could be considered a stakeholder. The core idea is that managers need to balance the often competing interests of all these different groups, not just focus on shareholders. It promotes more ethical and socially responsible behavior for long-term sustainability.
A broader view of responsibility. And the last one, postmodernism as a framework. How does that help analyze management?
Postmodernism as a framework offers a more critical lens. It encourages us to deconstruct, to take apart traditional management theories and practices, revealing hidden assumptions or biases.
Questioning the foundations again.
Pretty much. It emphasizes diversity and inclusion, often highlighting how traditional hierarchies might marginalize certain groups. It focuses on power relations, how language and dominant narratives shape what's considered normal or effective management. It's skeptical of those grand narratives or universal theories.
So what's the practical takeaway?
It encourages critical thinking. It pushes managers to be aware of power dynamics, to value different perspectives, and to understand that organizational reality is complex and often contested. It champions a more nuanced understanding.
Okay, different ways to slice and dice how we look at organizations. This brings us to the final part of the lecture, contemporary issues. What are the big forces shaping management philosophy right now?
Yeah, the lecture identifies 4 major interconnected trends that are really defining the current landscape: sustainability, corporate social responsibility, CSR, globalization, and digital transformation.
Makes sense. Let's start with sustainability. We hear that word constantly. What's the management angle?
In a management context, sustainability is fundamentally about operating the business in a way that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It's long-term thinking.
And it's not just environmental?
No, typically it's seen as having 3 key dimensions. Environmental, like reducing carbon footprint, conserving resources; social, like fair labor practices, community impact; and economic, ensuring the business itself is viable long-term.
Okay.
The lecture might point to a company like Patagonia as a strong example. They've really woven environmental and social responsibility into their business model, their products, their advocacy, and they argue it actually strengthens their brand and long-term success. The key insight: sustainability isn't just a buzzword, it's becoming a core strategic imperative.
Right, they live and breathe it. How does corporate social responsibility, CSR, relate? Is it the same thing?
It's very closely related, often overlapping, but CSR is usually framed as the voluntary actions a company takes to address social and environmental concerns, going beyond what's legally required.
The going the extra mile aspect.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about being a good corporate citizen, actively contributing to societal well-being. Think of the Body Shop. They built their whole brand around ethical sourcing, fair trade, anti-animal testing, long before it was mainstream.
Right, that was their identity.
Exactly, and it built tremendous customer loyalty. The core idea behind CSR is that businesses have a role to play in making the world better, proactively, not just reacting to problems or laws.
Okay, clear distinction. Next up, globalization. Feels like it's been reshaping things for decades.
It absolutely has and continues to. Globalization refers to that increasing interconnectedness of everything: economies, societies, cultures across the world. It's driven by trade, investment flows, technology, rapid communication.
We live it every day.
We do. A company like Apple is a classic example. Designed in California, components sourced globally, assembled in Asia, sold worldwide. It leverages that global network.
But it brings challenges too.
Huge challenges. While it creates massive economic opportunities, it also raises complex ethical issues. labor standards in different countries, human rights concerns, environmental impacts of global supply chains, job displacement in some areas. The key insight for management is that navigating this global landscape requires managing immense complexity, both operational and ethical.
A double-edged sword, then. And finally, digital transformation. This feels like the most disruptive force right now.
It arguably is. Digital transformation is about fundamentally changing how a business operates and delivers value by integrating digital technologies across the board.
Not just using computers, but rethinking everything.
Exactly. It involves adopting things like cloud computing, AI, big data analytics, the Internet of Things, but it's also about redesigning business processes, making decisions based on data, totally transforming the customer experience.
Can you give an example?
Netflix is the textbook case, right? They completely blew up their original model mailing DVDs and transformed into a global streaming giant, all powered by digital technology, data analytics, and a focus on the digital customer experience. The core insight: digital isn't just a tool anymore, it's fundamentally reshaping industries, competition, and how management itself needs to function.
From mailing discs to global streaming? Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly clarifying. We've really covered the waterfront, the definition, the historical shifts from classical to postmodern, those core concepts like purpose and power, the different theoretical lenses, and these huge contemporary issues like sustainability and digital transformation.
And the examples like Tesla, Patagonia, Apple, Netflix, they really help ground these ideas, I think.
They absolutely do. And it's really clear that this philosophy of management, it's not some static textbook subject.
Not at all. It's alive, it's dynamic, it's constantly evolving as the world changes. It has to.
Which is a great takeaway for you, the listener. Keep questioning those assumptions you run into, explore the different viewpoints we've talked about, and think about how these ideas connect to your own work or observations.
Yeah, and that actually leads to a really interesting final thought to leave you with. Considering how fast technology is moving and how interconnected everything is becoming, how might these fundamental philosophies of management need to change again in the coming years? What totally new ways of thinking about organizing work, about leadership, about purpose, what might emerge next? Something to chew on.